Jin Kim stared at the stars through the viewport of his quarters. His hand shook slightly as he held the medal they had given him just an hour ago. The light caught on its golden surface, winking at him like the distant stars his ship sailed past. "I never wanted this," he whispered to the empty room. 3 years ago, Jin had been working on clean energy systems at Seoul University. His life was quiet, filled with research and late nights in the lab. Then the Vraxian ships appeared in Earth's skies, and everything changed. The draft notice came 2 days later. The Terran Defense Force needed engineers, and Jin's test scores put him at the top of their list. He had tried to refuse, but the war effort left no room for personal choice. "Captain Kim," a voice called through his door. "Admiral Yoon requests your presence on the bridge." Jin sighed and placed the medal in a drawer. "I'll be right there." The hallways of the Dauntless were crowded with crew members who stopped to stare as he passed. Some saluted, others simply nodded with respect in their eyes. News traveled fast on a starship. Everyone knew about the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Everyone knew what the Phantom had done. The bridge fell silent when he entered. Admiral Yoon, a stern woman with gray in her hair, nodded at him. "Captain Kim, good of you to join us." She gestured to the main screen. "The Vraxians are regrouping at Ta City. Intelligence suggests they're planning another attack." Jin looked at the display. Red dots marked enemy ships. There were so many of them. "They're using a new formation," he said quietly. "See how they've positioned their cruisers. They've adapted to our tactics from the last battle." Admiral Yoon frowned. "Can you counter it?" Jin closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see ship movements, energy signatures, attack patterns. He had always been able to see patterns where others saw chaos. It was what made him a good engineer. Now it made him a weapon. "Yes," he said finally, "but it will cost us." "How many ships?" the Admiral asked. "Too many," Jin replied. His stomach felt tight. Each ship had a crew. Each crew member had a family. "But I have another idea." For the next hour, he worked at a console, fingers flying over the controls. The bridge crew watched in silence as he coded a new battle algorithm. When he was done, he looked up at Admiral Yoon. "This will disable their forward shields without destroying their ships," he explained. "We can force a surrender with minimal casualties on both sides." The Admiral studied the plan. Risky. The Council wants a decisive victory, not prisoners. "The Council isn't here," Jin said. "They don't have to look at the wreckage afterward." A tense silence followed. Jin knew he was overstepping, but he couldn't stop himself. He had seen enough death at Proxima Centauri to last a lifetime. Finally, Admiral Yoon nodded. "We'll try it your way, Captain. But if it fails, we revert to standard protocol." "It won't fail," Jin said. Later, alone in his quarters again, Jin looked at the small photo he kept by his bed. His parents smiled back at him, standing in front of their small house in the countryside. They had been so proud when he got into university. What would they think of him now? "I'm sorry," he told the picture. "I'm trying to do the right thing." Outside his window, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere out there, the Vraxian fleet was waiting. Tomorrow would bring another battle, another test of his unwanted skills. Jin Kim, the man they called the Phantom, closed his eyes. He didn't feel like a hero. Heroes slept peacefully at night. Heroes didn't see the faces of the dead when they closed their eyes. Tomorrow, he would save as many lives as he could. It was the only peace he could make with what he had become. Commander Haendel Park stood alone in her private chamber aboard the Vraxian warship Relentless. The blue light from the display cast shadows across her face as she watched the battle footage again. The human ships should have been destroyed at Proxima Centauri. The Vraxian fleet had them outnumbered 3-1. Yet somehow, the humans had turned certain defeat into victory. "Show me the Terran flagship movements again," she ordered the computer. The display zoomed in on a single human ship. It moved in ways that defied standard battle tactics, seeming to predict Vraxian attacks before they happened. Hanul leaned closer. Unlike the aliens who had raised her since childhood, she still looked human. Her dark eyes narrowed as she studied the ship's path. "Who commands this vessel?" she asked. "Captain Ta-Jin Kim," the computer replied. Humans called him the Phantom. "Show me his file." A face appeared on screen. A man with tired eyes and a serious expression. According to the file, he had been an engineer before the war, not a soldier. Hanul found this interesting. Someone knocked on her door. "Enter," she called, quickly closing the display. General Orcs, her Vraxian superior, stepped into the room. His gray skin and 4 eyes marked him as different from her, a constant reminder that she did not truly belong here. "Commander Park," he said, his voice harsh. "The High Command wants answers about Proxima Centauri." "I am studying the battle now," she replied. "The humans used unconventional tactics." "They got lucky," Orcs growled. "Nothing more." Hanul knew better than to argue. The Vraxians believed themselves superior to all other species, especially humans. To suggest otherwise was dangerous. "Of course, General," she said. "With your permission, I would like to continue my analysis." After Orcs left, Hanul returned to her study of Ta-Jin Kim. She pulled up every record available. His education, his forced recruitment, his rapid rise through the ranks. Something about him fascinated her. That night, she dreamed of Earth, a planet she barely remembered. In her dream, she walked through green fields under a blue sky. A man watched her from a distance. When he turned, she saw it was the human captain with the tired eyes. The next morning, Hanul requested command of the forward fleet. "You wish to face the humans directly?" High Admiral Zev asked, surprise evident in his voice. "I understand them better than any other commander," Hanul replied. "I know how they think." "Because you were once one of them," Zev said. It wasn't a compliment. "Yes," she said simply. "Use that to our advantage." 3 days later, Hanul stood on the bridge of her new command ship, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the human engineer turned captain was planning his next move. "I will find you, Phantom," she whispered. Her second-in-command approached with a datapad. "New intelligence, Commander. The human fleet is moving toward Ta City." Hanul smiled. "Set course to intercept." As her ship jumped to light speed, Hanul thought about Ta-Jin Kim. The report said he tried to disable Vraxian ships rather than destroy them. This was unusual. Most human captains showed no such mercy. "Why do you spare us?" she wondered aloud. "What kind of warrior are you?" She would find out soon enough. At Tau City, their minds would battle across the void of space. Ship against ship, tactician against tactician. Hanul felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement. In Ta-Jin Kim, she sensed a worthy opponent. Perhaps even someone who might understand what it meant to live between two worlds, belonging to neither. "Prepare all weapons," she ordered, "but hold fire until my command." This time, she would not underestimate the Phantom. Ta-Jin hadn't slept in 3 days. His quarters on the Dauntless were littered with empty coffee cups and discarded notes. On his workstation, a small device hummed with blue energy. "Run test sequence 17, he told the computer, rubbing his tired eyes. The simulation showed a Vraxian plasma blast hitting an invisible barrier. The barrier held. Ta-Jin allowed himself a small smile. It works. For months, he had been studying Vraxian weapons. Their ships used plasma technology far more advanced than anything humans had. But plasma had one weakness: it could be redirected with the right electromagnetic field. His door chimed. "Captain Kim, Admiral Yoon needs you on the bridge immediately." When Ta-Jin arrived, the bridge was tense. The main screen showed the fleet approaching Ta City. "Vraxian ships detected," the sensor officer announced. "Twice as many as our intelligence suggested." Admiral Yoon turned to Ta-Jin. Your plan may not work against these numbers, Captain. Ta Jin studied the enemy formation. Something about it seemed familiar. They're using a variant of my own tactic from Proxima Centauri, he said quietly. Someone over there has been studying me. Can you counter it? The Admiral asked. Yes, Ta Jin replied. But first, I need to show you something. In the ship's lab, Ta Jin placed his device on the table before the Admiral and other senior officers. I call it the Aegis Shield, he explained. It can absorb and redirect Vraxian plasma weapons. The officers stared at the small device skeptically. You expect this tiny thing to protect our ships? Commander Lee asked. No, Ta Jin said. I expect 100 of these, linked together, to create a shield wall that can protect the entire fleet. 2 hours later, engineers had installed the devices across the fleet. They were untested in actual battle, but they were the best hope humanity had. As they approached Ta City, Ta Jin stood on the bridge, watching the enemy fleet grow larger on the screen. They'd spotted us, the tactical officer reported. Enemy ships are powering weapons. Hold position, Admiral Yoon ordered. Activate Aegis Shield on my mark. Ta Jin's heart pounded in his chest. If his calculations were wrong, thousands would die. Enemy ships firing, someone shouted. Now, the Admiral commanded. Blue energy flared between the human ships, forming a translucent barrier. The Vraxian plasma weapons hit the shield and stopped. The energy rippled and twisted, then shot back toward the enemy ships. It's working, Ta Jin whispered. But then alarms sounded throughout the bridge. Shield fluctuation in Sector 7. An officer called. The feedback is too strong. Ta Jin rushed to a console. Divert power from Sectors 3 and 5. He worked quickly, rerouting energy, stabilizing the shield. In the chaos, no one noticed that the Dauntless had drifted away from the main fleet. When the shield stabilized, Ta Jin looked up to see 3 Vraxian dreadnoughts surrounding them. We're cut off, Admiral Yoon said grimly. Prepare for direct combat. But Ta Jin had another idea. Wait, the shield can do more than defend. Working rapidly, he reconfigured the ship's Aegis devices. Instead of a barrier, he created a pulse that shot outward in all directions. When it hit the 3 Vraxian ships, their lights flickered and died. They drifted, powerless but intact. What did you do? Admiral Yoon asked, staring at the disabled enemy vessels. I reversed the energy signature, Ta Jin explained. It temporarily disabled their power cores without destroying them. Why not destroy them? Commander Lee demanded. They're the enemy. Ta Jin looked at the disabled ships on the screen. There are 600 crew members on each of those ships. They don't need to die today. As the rest of the battle raged around them, the Dauntless moved to board the first Vraxian dreadnought. I should lead the boarding party, Ta Jin said, strapping on his armor. Admiral Yoon frowned. You're too valuable to risk, Captain. The Vraxians will have backup systems, Ta Jin explained. I'm the only one who fully understands how the Aegis technology works. Reluctantly, the Admiral agreed. 20 minutes later, Ta Jin and a team of Marines attached their boarding shuttle to the largest Vraxian dreadnought. Stay behind me, Lieutenant Song, the Marine leader, told Ta Jin. Your job is to keep their systems offline. Our job is to protect you. The shuttle doors opened with a hiss. The Marines moved in first, weapons ready. Ta Jin followed, carrying his modified Aegis device. The Vraxian ship was dark, lit only by emergency lights. The air smelled different, slightly sweet, like overripe fruit. Ta Jin checked his scanner. Life signs ahead, he whispered. The bridge should be 2 levels up. They met little resistance. Most Vraxian crew members surrendered when they saw the Marines. Those who fought were quickly stunned and restrained. Ta Jin was glad that Admiral Yoon had agreed to use non-lethal weapons. At the bridge entrance, they paused. Lieutenant Song looked at Ta Jin. Ready? She asked. Tajin nodded. The Marines breached the door and rushed in, shouting for everyone to get down. Tajin entered last. The Vraxian bridge was larger than human ships, with curved control panels and strange symbols floating in the air. Several Vraxian officers stood with their 4 arms raised in surrender. But one figure remained standing tall at the center of the bridge. Unlike the others, this person had 2 arms, not 4. Tajin moved closer and froze. It was a human woman. She wore a Vraxian commander's uniform, and her dark eyes were fixed on Tajin with intense curiosity. "Captain Tajin Kim," she said in perfect English. "The Phantom. I've been studying you." Tajin felt the Marines tense around him. A human commanding a Vraxian ship was unheard of. "You have me at a disadvantage," Tajin replied. "You know my name, but I don't know yours." "Commander Hainul Park of the Imperial Vraxian Fleet," she said, "though I was born on Earth." The Marines murmured in shock. Lieutenant Song raised her weapon. "She's a traitor," Song growled. "Hold fire," Tajin ordered. He stepped forward, eyes still on Hainul. "How did you come to serve the Vraxian Empire?" "I was taken during their first survey mission, 20 years ago," Hainul explained. "I was 5 years old. They raised me as one of their own." Tajin studied her face. There was no fear there, only calm assessment. She was analyzing him just as he was analyzing her. "Your technology is impressive," Hainul said, gesturing at the Aegis device in his hand. "You disabled 3 warships without destroying them. Most humans would not show such restraint. Unnecessary death serves no purpose." Tajin replied. Something flashed in Hainul's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or agreement. "What are your terms, Captain?" she asked. Tajin thought quickly. Standard protocol required all prisoners to be secured and separated for interrogation. But looking at Hainul and the Vraxian crew, he saw not enemies but people caught in the same war as him. "Your crew will remain together," he said. "They will be treated with dignity and provided medical care if needed. No one will be harmed." Lieutenant Song looked at him in surprise. "Captain, that's not standard." "Those are my terms." Tajin interrupted firmly. "Do you accept, Commander Park?" Hainul studied him for a long moment. Then, to the shock of her own crew, she nodded. "I accept," she said simply. As the Marines began securing the bridge, Tajin and Hainul continued to watch each other, both sensing that this meeting was somehow important, not just for them, but perhaps for the entire war. The small room on Earth's orbital defense station was plain. It had 1 table, 2 chairs, and no windows. Tajin sat across from Hainul, who wore simple gray clothes instead of her Vraxian uniform. "They've been watching us for 2 hours," Hainul said, glancing at the hidden camera in the corner. Tajin nodded. "General Brooks wants information about Vraxian fleet movements. And he thinks I'll tell you because we're both human." Hainul smiled slightly. "Your military leaders don't understand the Vraxian concept of loyalty." "No," Tajin agreed. "They don't understand much about the Vraxians at all. That's why we're still fighting this war." He pushed a tablet across the table. It showed images of destroyed planets and space stations. 3 billion people have died," he said quietly, "on both sides." Hainul looked at the images, her face carefully blank. But Tajin saw something flicker in her eyes. "Why did you become an engineer?" she asked suddenly. The question surprised him. "I wanted to build things that helped people, not destroy them." "Never that," Tajin said. Hainul leaned forward. "The Vraxians are builders too. Before this war, they created wonders. Living cities, ships that could heal themselves, art that changes with the viewer's emotions. Then why attack Earth? They believed they had no choice." Hainul sighed. "There was a message from Earth 15 years ago. It threatened to destroy any Vraxian ship that entered this solar system." Tajin frowned. "That's impossible. 15 years ago, we barely had ships that could reach Mars." "I know," Hey Newell said. Something doesn't make sense. Both sides believe they're defending themselves. For the next week, their meetings continued. The generals called them interrogations. Ta Jin and He Newell knew they were becoming something else. They talked about engineering and tactics, about earth foods He Newell barely remembered, and Vraxian music Ta Jin found beautiful once she described it. How did they treat you? Ta Jin asked one day. The Vraxians who raised you. He Newell's face softened. My guardian, Ishara, was kind. She taught me that strength comes in many forms. She fought to let me keep my human name. You could have changed it, Ta Jin noted. It was the only thing I had from Earth, He Newell said simply. On the 10th day, General Brooks called Ta Jin to his office. You're getting nowhere with the prisoner, he said angrily. We need real intelligence, not philosophical discussions. She's not just a prisoner, Ta Jin argued. She's a bridge between our cultures. She could help end this war. The general's face hardened. The council has other plans. They want to use her in a public broadcast. The human traitor who joined our enemy. It will boost support for the war effort. Ta Jin felt cold. She's not a traitor. She was a child when they took her. Tell that to the families of our dead soldiers, Brooks snapped. That night, Ta Jin couldn't sleep. He pulled up the security feed from He Newell's room on his tablet. She sat on her bed, perfectly still, staring at the wall. He made a secure call to a Vraxian prisoner he had befriended during the transport to Earth. What happens to those who are rejected by the Empire? He asked. The Vraxian's 4 eyes blinked sadly. They are considered non-persons. Any Vraxian may kill them without consequence. Ta Jin thought about He Newell, caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. Just like him, she was a tool being used by forces that cared nothing for her as a person. By morning, he had made his decision. It would cost him everything, but he couldn't let them destroy her. At midnight, the lights in the orbital defense station dimmed for sleep cycle. Ta Jin walked quickly through the empty halls, his heart pounding in his chest. His captain's uniform gave him access to most areas, but what he planned to do would make him a traitor. He reached the security office and nodded to the guard. System check, he said, showing his tablet with fake orders. Won't take long. Once inside, he inserted a small device into the main computer. It was a modified version of his Aegis technology, designed to create a 30-minute loop in the security cameras. Next, he went to the medical bay and took supplies, food packets, medicine, and 2 emergency breath masks. He hid them in his bag. Finally, he approached He Newell's room. The guard there was young, nervous around the famous Phantom. General Brooks wants to see the prisoner. Ta Jin lied. At this hour, sir, the guard asked. New information from the front. It's urgent. The guard hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. When the door opened, He Newell looked up in surprise. She read something in Ta Jin's face and stood without speaking. In the hallway, instead of turning toward the command center, Ta Jin led her in the opposite direction. What are you doing? He Newell whispered. Getting you out, he replied. They plan to use you as propaganda, then probably execute you for treason. And the Vraxians will kill me as a rejected non-person, she said. I have nowhere to go. Ta Jin looked at her. We have somewhere to go. Together. They reached the shuttle bay without being seen. Ta Jin had prepared a small transport ship, programming it for automatic launch. But as they approached it, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Someone discovered the loop, Ta Jin said. Run. They sprinted for the shuttle. Behind them, doors slid open and security forces poured in, weapons raised. Stop or we'll shoot, someone shouted. Ta Jin pushed He Newell ahead of him, shielding her with his body. They reached the shuttle and scrambled inside. Laser fire hit the hull as the doors closed. Can you fly this? He asked as they strapped in. Yes, He Newell said, hands moving confidently over the controls. The shuttle shot forward, breaking free of the station. Jin expected pursuit ships immediately, but none came. "That's strange," he said, checking the sensors. Newell frowned at the communication panel. "Listen to this." She played an incoming message. It was in Vraxian, but with her translation, Jin understood the shocking news. Vraxian ships were attacking 3 human colonies simultaneously. "They couldn't know about us yet," Jin said. "This is something else." Newell was studying the ship's computer. "Look at this," she said. She had found a hidden file, encrypted but partially accessible. It contained communications between someone in Earth's military leadership and an unknown party. "They're discussing attack coordinates," Jin said in disbelief. "But these are the exact locations of the colonies being hit now." "Someone betrayed your people," Newell said quietly. As they read more, a terrible picture emerged. For years, someone had been feeding information to the Vraxians while also sending fake human threats to the Vraxian Empire. "Someone wants this war to continue," Jin said. Newell pointed to a name repeated in the communications, the Coal Consortium. "Arms dealers," Jin whispered. "They supply both sides." They looked at each other, understanding dawning. They weren't just fugitives now. They had uncovered a conspiracy that had cost billions of lives. "Where do we go?" Newell asked. Jin thought for a moment. "I have a friend, Jai-Ho. He runs a repair station at the edge of human space. If anyone can help us, he can." As their small shuttle jumped to light speed, behind them Earth's orbital defense station faded into the distance. Neither of them could go home again. Jai-Ho's repair station hung in space like a metal spider, its many docking arms extending from a central hub. It was located in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, far from military patrols but close enough to trade routes to get business. Jin and Newell's shuttle approached cautiously. They had been running for 2 weeks, changing ships twice to avoid capture. "Are you sure we can trust him?" Newell asked. "Jai-Ho and I grew up together," Jin said. "Before the war, we planned to start an engineering company. He's like a brother to me." The station's comm system crackled. "Unidentified shuttle. State your business." "Jai-Ho, it's me," Jin said. "I need help." There was a long pause. Then, "Docket Arm 5. Come alone." When they landed, Jai-Ho was waiting with a stunner pointed at them. He was shorter than Jin, with quick eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving. Those hands were steady now as he held the weapon. "You're all over the news," Jai-Ho said. "Earth's greatest hero turned traitor." "It's not what they're saying," Jin started. "It never is." Jai-Ho looked at Newell. "And you brought a Vraxian commander with you." "Perfect." "I'm human," Newell said quietly. Jai-Ho studied her face. "Interesting. Come inside before someone sees you." In Jai-Ho's cluttered office, they showed him the files they had found. He examined them on a secure system not connected to any network. "This is big," he said finally. "The Coal Consortium has been playing both sides for years. They want this war to never end. We need to get this information to people who can stop the fighting," Jin said. Jai-Ho laughed bitterly. "Who?" "The military leaders making money from coal weapons contracts. The politicians getting donations from coal-owned companies. There must be someone we can trust," Newell insisted. Jai-Ho thought for a moment. "Maybe not one person, but many. I know others who question this war. Pilots, engineers, even some commanders." "On the human side?" Jin asked. "Both sides," Jai-Ho replied. "There's a network. We share information, help people escape the fighting when we can." For the next month, Jin and Newell stayed at the repair station. They worked with Jai-Ho's network, gathering more evidence of the Coal Consortium's manipulation. Newell made contact with her former second-in-command, a Vraxian named Maiko who had always treated her with respect. To her surprise, Maiko believed her and brought 3 other Vraxian officers into their group. One night, as Jin and Haenul studied star maps in Jaiho's office. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. "I never expected this," Haenul said softly, "finding someone who sees the world as I do." "Someone caught between two sides," Tajin added, "not belonging fully to either." Tajin looked at her. "Maybe we belong here, creating a third option." Their growing coalition gave them hope, but they needed a way to share their evidence with both sides at once, in a way that couldn't be ignored or covered up. Their chance came when they learned about an upcoming battle. Both fleets were preparing for what military leaders called the decisive engagement near Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. "The Coal Consortium's main supply ship will be there," Jaiho told them, pointing to intelligence reports. "They always observe major battles to assess weapon performance." Tajin studied the battle plans their network had obtained. "If we could take control of the communication systems on both fleets at the same time, we could broadcast the evidence to everyone." Haenul finished his thought. "It's suicide," Jaiho warned. "You'd have to be on the consortium ship to override both fleets' security." Tajin and Haenul looked at each other. In that moment, they made a silent agreement. They had started this journey together. They would finish it the same way, whatever the cost. The space around Europa was filled with ships. Human vessels faced Vraxian dreadnoughts across the void. Between them, slightly to one side, hung the Coal Consortium's observation ship, larger than a transport but smaller than a warship. Its sleek black hull absorbed the light from Jupiter, making it almost invisible against the darkness of space. Tajin and Haenul approached in a small maintenance vessel with fake identification codes. Jaiho had painted it with Coal Consortium colors and markings. "They're scanning us," Haenul said, watching the sensors. Tajin took a deep breath. "Send the access codes." Jaiho had obtained the codes from a coal technician who had visited his repair station. The technician never realized his security badge had been copied during his stay. "Access granted," Haenul said with surprise. "They're opening the secondary maintenance bay." They docked without incident. Both wore Coal Consortium uniforms, also provided by Jaiho's network. Tajin carried a bag with tools and his modified Aegis device. Haenul had a small data drive with all their evidence. "Remember the plan," Tajin said quietly as they walked through the corridors. "Find the communication center, broadcast the evidence, then get out." "And if we can't get out?" Haenul asked. Tajin didn't answer. They both knew this might be a one-way mission. They passed several coal workers who barely glanced at them. Their disguises were working, but when they reached the central section of the ship, a security guard stopped them. "Identification," he demanded. Haenul showed her fake ID. The guard checked it, then looked at Tajin. "You look familiar," the guard said, frowning. Tajin's hand moved toward the stunner hidden under his jacket. Before he could draw it, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Intruder alert. All security to Section 7. "That's not for us," Haenul said. "It's coming from the other direction." "Someone else is here," Tajin realized. The guard turned toward the sound. Haenul used the distraction to strike, knocking him unconscious with a quick blow. They ran toward the communication center, no longer trying to hide. When two more guards appeared, Tajin used his Aegis device to disable their weapons. "Who taught you to fight like that?" Tajin asked as they continued running. "Vraxian military training," Haenul replied. "Who taught you to modify weapons so quickly?" "Engineering school," he answered with a small smile. They'd reached the communication center door. It was locked, with a security panel requiring fingerprint access. "Now what?" Haenul asked. Tajin pulled a small tool from his bag. "Stand back." He placed the tool against the panel. It sparked, and the door slid open. Inside, 3 technicians looked up in surprise. "Don't move," Haenul ordered, pointing her stunner at them. While she secured the technicians, Tajin went to the main console. His fingers flew over the controls as he hacked into the system. "I'm in," he said after several tense minutes. "I can access both fleets' communication systems from here." Hanuel inserted their data drive. "Start the broadcast." Across both fleets, communication systems suddenly activated on every ship. Screens showed the evidence they had gathered. Secret meetings between coal representatives and military leaders from both sides, weapon shipments, falsified attack orders, and manipulated peace talks. In the coal communication center, Ta-Jin and Hanuel watched as their message spread. "They'll try to stop the broadcast," Ta-Jin said. As if on cue, the door burst open. Coal's security forces rushed in, weapons raised. "Keep the broadcast going," Hanuel told Ta-Jin. "I'll hold them off." She moved to block the doorway, her stunner firing rapidly. But there were too many guards. Ta-Jin saw her fall. With a cry, he activated his Aegis device at full power. The blue energy field expanded outward, disabling all electronics in the room, except for the broadcast, which he had protected with a special shield. Through the ship's windows, he could see both fleets had stopped firing at each other. All eyes were on the evidence being presented. Ta-Jin knelt beside Hanuel. She was wounded but alive. "Did it work?" she asked weakly. "Yes," he said, holding her hand. "They're all watching. They know the truth now." Across both fleets, Ta-Jin's face appeared on every screen, a human who had risked everything to end the war. Without realizing it, he had become a symbol to both sides, a battlefield icon who fought not for victory, but for truth. 3 months after the battle at Europa, Ta-Jin stood by a large window in the peace station. The newly built neutral zone floated between Earth and Vraxian space. Outside the window, ships from both sides moved peacefully around each other. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Hanuel said, joining him at the window. Her left arm was in a sling, still healing from the wounds she received on the coal ship. "Sometimes I expect to wake up and find we're still at war," Ta-Jin admitted. After their broadcast, both fleets had turned their weapons on the coal consortium ship. In the chaos, Jeho had arrived with a rescue team, extracting Ta-Jin and the injured Hanuel just before the consortium ship was destroyed. The evidence they revealed had changed everything. The war had stopped immediately. The coal consortium leaders were arrested. Military officials who had worked with them were removed from power. Now representatives from both sides were meeting on this station to create a formal peace treaty. Ta-Jin and Hanuel had been asked to help as mediators, trusted by humans and Vraxians alike. "The human delegation wants to meet with you before the final session," Hanuel told him. Ta-Jin nodded. "And the Vraxian High Council wants to see you." They walked together through the station's curved hallways. People stopped to stare as they passed. Some offered quiet thanks, others just watched with respect. "I still don't feel like a hero," Ta-Jin said softly. "Heroes rarely do," Hanuel replied. They reached a junction where they needed to part ways. Ta-Jin to the human section, Hanuel to the Vraxian area. "See you at the signing," she said, squeezing his hand briefly. The human delegation was led by Admiral Chen, who had replaced the disgraced military leaders. He had opposed the war from the beginning, but had been ignored. "Captain Kim," he greeted Ta-Jin. "We've reviewed the final treaty terms. They're fair to both sides." "And the technology exchange program?" Ta-Jin asked. "Approved. Vraxian medical technology for human agricultural methods." The Admiral smiled. "Your suggestion was excellent." Later that day, everyone gathered in the Great Hall for the treaty signing. Ta-Jin and Hanuel stood together in the center as the human and Vraxian leaders approached the table. As the treaty was signed, cheers erupted from the watching crowd. 3 years of brutal war had finally ended. That night, when the celebrations were over, Ta-Jin couldn't sleep. The nightmares came again. Explosions, dying ships, faces of those he couldn't save. He walked to the observation deck, hoping the sight of the stars would calm him. He found Hanuel already there, looking out at space. "Nightmares?" he asked. She nodded. Every night. Does it get easier? Not yet, she said honestly. But maybe someday. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who understood each other's pain without need for words. What will you do now? Tajin asked. The Vraxian Council has asked me to lead a cultural exchange program, Haynul said, to help humans understand Vraxians better, and the reverse. They've asked me to head the Joint Technology Research Team, Tajin said, building things to help people, like I always wanted. Haynul smiled. It seems we'll be working together again. As the station rotated, Earth came into view through the window, a blue and green jewel in the darkness. Beyond it, the purple-tinged world of the Vraxian home planet was just visible. Two worlds, Tajin said, no longer at war. Because of two people who didn't quite fit in either, Haynul added. Tajin looked at her. Maybe that's what we needed all along. People who could see both sides. The next morning, as the first official day of peace began, Tajin and Haynul walked together into the new future they had helped create. The public saw the battlefield icons who had ended the war, but they saw in each other what no one else could, the fragile souls behind the legend, finding strength in shared understanding and the promise of a lasting peace.